So welcome to the April edition of the 2024 MAIC webinar series. Today, we will be talking about tips for effective social media presence and management for farmers. But before we get started on that, I did want to just remind people that we will have a May webinar. And the May webinar will be on Friday the 17th. That's the third Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. We're going to be talking about sea urchins and sea urchin aquaculture for that webinar. So definitely stay tuned for more information about that. But today we have a very exciting group of panelists who will be speaking to us about social media on all levels. From the high level, looking at it with the big picture, down to what you can do as a farmer on your farm. So we have with us today Kim Thompson, Trixie, Betz, Paxton, Spencer, and Alicia Gaiero. And I will start out by introducing Kim, who will be our first speaker. But just before I do that, I do want to mention one other thing, which is if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. We would love to have audience questions, and we will do our best to get to as many of those as possible at the end of the webinar, at the end of the presentations from our speakers today. So definitely feel free to do that. And to introduce Kim. So Kim started her aquaculture journey at one of the largest aquariums in the US, where she managed projects to advance responsible marine aquaculture in the US. One of her core areas of focus is understanding public perceptions and the impact of social media on growing marine aquaculture in the US. And she is passionate about forward-looking solutions to improve stakeholder and public awareness and support for marine aquaculture. So, without any further ado, Kim, if you want to share your slides, awesome. And I will spotlight you. There you go. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Maya. Yeah, thank you to the Aquaculture Innovation Center team for inviting me to hang out with you guys today. I am Kim Thompson. I am actually coming to you from the West Coast. I served as a program manager for the Aquarium of the Pacific's Seafood for the Future program for more than 10 years. I do want to preface this with I am no longer at the aquarium. They were kind enough to let me present this to you as I was the lead on this project, but please don't take any of my color commentary to reflect on the aquarium. They're an amazing organization. I really loved working for them. And I was very fortunate to have been able to work on this particular project as one of my last before I left. So this project was funded by the NOAA Salt and Stall Kennedy Grant Program. And the idea came out of actually a forum we had held a couple years before, looking at public perceptions and social license challenges for marine aquaculture. So we brought a bunch of stakeholders together. What are the challenges? But then we were also trying to understand what some tools and resources might be to address some of those challenges. And one of the things that kept popping up in that conversation and many conversations after was social media, right? Social media is accessible. It is affordable. It reaches a lot of people with very little resources. It just made sense to create some kind of tools and resources to really help aquaculture farmers tell their story, control their narratives a little bit better. So we did receive this funding because it is Salt and Stall Kennedy. Keep in mind, we did make it broader. So this is U.S. seafood. So this is fishermen and seafood farmers. And as I'm going through this content, again, keep in mind, it's very high level. You know, it's not very granular for specific areas of aquaculture, but it's a good starting point. And I think this could be a really useful guide for anybody looking to dive into social media to connect better with their communities. And I do want to point out that while, yes, this is also important for marketing, it is much more than that. So for social license and perceptions, there's been a lot of work done to show that most of the public doesn't really know what aquaculture is, but the more they do understand what it is, there is a correlation with more positive perceptions. And this is going to be really important. It's also about community building, because besides marketing, if you're going to go for a permit down the line, or you're going to try to expand your permit, you're going to need that community support. And we live in the real world, so there's always going to be some opposition, but the more trust and support you can build with your community, the more you might be able to chip away at some of that opposition and make it a little bit easier to get through that gauntlet. So that's something to keep in mind as we're going through this as well. So again, why social media? You could reach large audiences, it's cost effective, and again, it's playing that more proactive role for the individual growers to shape the broader narrative and amplify your own stories, and making those connections to communities as well as marketing your product. I do want to point out that Instagram was the primary platform that we used for testing purposes. When I say testing, what we did was there was some message testing that I'll get to in a moment. We also had a consultant who connected us with influencers who tested some of those messages and contents. We also tested images and graphics. And then the last phase of it was focus groups. So we had focus groups kind of look at different products and give us a little bit more of a qualitative discussion around certain products. So the testing round that we did, one of the questions that we asked is, who are the most trusted sources of information when it comes to information about sustainable food systems? Where does your food come from? And if you look at this graph, seafood farmers, along with fishermen and aquariums, you guys come in second. You guys are important. Your voice matters. You can influence these conversations. So I think that's really important to point out. This is a snapshot of the message testing. There's a lot of information here, but basically, obviously, the ones on the top performed well, the ones on the bottom, not so much. You can see we did try to break it down by region, and originally the guide was supposed to give regional information. But as you can see, there's really not a lot of difference here. So we didn't actually have to break down anything because they're all really close. What is interesting is if you look at the bottom message, that the U.S. is globally recognized as a leader in sustainable fisheries management, but then you look at I believe it is the third message, fishermen and seafood farmers held to high standards. They're essentially the same message, but where you see the difference is, and again, this is the importance of you getting your face out there, telling your story, you're humanizing that message a little bit more by putting the U.S. fishermen and seafood farmers as the subject there, versus just the US as a broad kind of faceless entity. I think that's really important to note as we're moving through this, and the value of you guys sharing your stories and making these direct connections. So this is just kind of a nicer screenshot of those top three messages. So seafood and human health, being held to higher standards and regulations to protect people, wildlife, and ecosystems. And then supporting local economies were the top messages. So out of those messages, we came with these core themes: seafood and human health, environmental standards, supporting a more sustainable food future, and supporting local economies. So these were the buckets that we focused on for the remainder of the guide. Again, keeping in mind high level US seafood. So I'm only going to show you seafood and human health, but for each of those buckets, we have a similar page. And what it provides you is some sample key messages of what those would look like. But again, we'd highly recommend that you tailor those to your specific product, your region. But these give you some examples. There's some tips then for how to tailor your own messages. So of course, with nutrition, you want to provide some recipes. You want to provide the nutritional benefits specific to your product. And I would say the most impactful thing you could do here, again, is featuring your own family recipes and anecdotes for tips that you and your family are using when you're preparing these products that you're producing and bringing them home. And then for each of these, we do have some resources, again, very general, very high level. In Maine, you're very fortunate. You have the Maine Aquaculture Innovation Center, Maine Aquaculture Association, you have the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. So for these different topics, you may have more localized resources. We also, as I mentioned, did some image testing, and no surprise, when you show people they're happy with what they're doing, right? Smiling faces, that's going to go a long way. Interestingly, images that show beautiful ecosystem shots. So even with that, fishing boat in the foreground, people really loved that it looked like it was in nature. They really loved that image. And this image of the fish is actually fish in a pen in Hawaii, but it looks very natural. It looks like a healthy, thriving ecosystem, and people liked that image. What you don't want to do, and I know there's not a lot of finfish folks here, but don't show the carnage. People don't want to see that. It reminds them of overfishing, cruelty to animals, and wastefulness. If you want to show action shots, absolutely, you can do that, but there are ways to do that without showing, bloody carcasses on the deck. But absolutely, show the fishermen, show the farmers doing what they do. Just be cautious about how you're framing that. And I would give a word of advice also with oysters. We were filming, and I don't remember why, you guys know why they were doing this, but they were hitting the bags in the footage, and we were editing, and one of my colleagues was like, well, aren't they alive? Right. So there's things like that you just want to be conscious of when you're putting it out there, who your audience is and how they might perceive that. There's also the graphics. So in the guide, you'll see that there is a table of different products you can use that range from free to maybe, 20, 30 bucks a month. It depends on what you're looking to do, how many bells and whistles you want. But it is a lot easier to use programs. My favorite is Canva, to put these graphics together. So we tested some of these graphics to see how they would do. And you can see the top ones, they're very simple, very straight to the point. Whether or not you know a lot about seafood, you're going to understand what this message is, right? It's pretty clear, but it's also a compelling image, right? It compels you to want to click it. The bottom two, I would say I personally liked the bottom two, and I was kind of surprised, but it makes sense, right? So we understand this world, and it's a lot easier for us at a first glance to take a look at this and kind of know what's going on. But think about it. If you're a general Joe public, you don't know much or anything about seafood, there's a lot going on here, and you're not immediately going to look at this and say, oh, I get what's going on here. So keep that in mind too. So some general tips. Trixie's going to get into a lot of these, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I would just re-emphasize, do not overstate or embellish facts, and don't deny risk exists. End of the day, you are producing food. While yes, the benefits of what you're doing, if you're doing it the right way, are going to outweigh those risks, you are not a oops-proof, the food system is not oops-proof. It all has risks. So just don't deny that. Be honest and open about that. Try not to throw other types of food production under the bus. This is really hard to do. I've spent my career comparing the benefits of seafood to maybe some of those issues that they're having with land-based protein production. And I am trying to find ways to back away with that without, skipping over the truth. But especially seafood to seafood, right? So we have a lot of shellfish and seaweed farmers. We had done a test many years ago, and there were some shellfish and seaweed farmers who loved to throw finfish under the bus. Don't do it. Even if you don't care for it, again, the general public, they don't understand these nuances and differences. They just see farmed seafood. And so as you start throwing others under the bus, they're going to come to the counter and they're going to say, wait, what was good? What was bad? I'm confused. I'm just going to eat the hamburger because I'm used to it, right? I'm not confused by that. So it's not a benefit for anybody. If you want to have those arguments behind the scenes, go nuts. Don't do it on social media. And then, if somebody has a negative comment that you're not super comfortable with, absolutely, you can address them, but be professional. Definitely take a step back, take a breath, respond within 24 hours. But I would highly recommend you respond once with a thoughtful response. I would even thank them, thank you for your thoughts. I appreciate that, but here's why X, Y, and Z, and leave it alone. Keep in mind, this is a written record. So if you do that, as people come in, even if they continue with the negative comments, people are going to see your last comment, and that's going to be a thoughtful, structured comment. If you engage, they're going to see you start to get sloppy, and that last comment is going to be what they see and what they remember. So keep that in mind. And then I just want to acknowledge, again, it takes a village. So these are all the amazing people who helped us get this project underway. And I'm going to leave it at that because I have gone over time. I'm excited to hear from the other presenters. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Trixie, I'm just going to add you as a spotlight here and introduce you. So next up, we have Trixie Betz from the Maine Aquaculture Association. And Trixie was introduced to aquaculture through her work on an oyster farm in Brunswick, Maine, where she exercised her creative skills to tell the farm story through social media. Now, in her current role, she expands on what MAA has done to date by building on new and enhanced social media campaigns, sharp video production and design, as well as other key methods of outreach, both online and in person. And she is passionate about farmer forward storytelling that amplifies the narratives of people who shape the industry. So without any more ado, go ahead, Trixie, take it away.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Kim, for that great introduction. I will say that polling data that we've done in Maine does support that greater knowledge about the industry is directly correlated with greater support. So education in all forms is a great method for increasing support for the industry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at the MAA, and it's slightly different than like business marketing, but we use a lot of marketing techniques to further what we call social license, which is Emily is very familiar with. But basically, our goal at the MAA is to build broader support for aquaculture in Maine and support our growers in any way that we can. So we have been around since 1978, and social media has been a relatively recent addition to our communications, but has been a really powerful tool for telling the story of Maine aquaculture. And storytelling is one of our biggest prerogatives in the communications department. And so I'm going to get into some of the social media platforms we use. So we primarily operate on Instagram and Facebook. Those are the platforms that we have the most following on. So we like to deliver our content there. But we have also explored other platforms like TikTok, LinkedIn, Google, and YouTube. And we're looking at implementing possibly some work on Snapchat, some of the sort of newer platforms. Most of our content is photo and video. We've seen that that does really well. And Kim's guide demonstrates that as well, that hooking people with some dynamic content, whether it's colorful or visually interesting, is a great way to draw people in. But we also use these platforms to reshare content from other people. So farmer content, we like to repost that, get some more attention to that. And then we also have the Oyster Trail Instagram, which is a little bit more tailored to the marketing, travel, and tourism side, which can help bring attention to some of the farms that are on the trail and just boost their content and what they're up to. So we consider ourselves kind of a platform for a lot of different people and not just our original content. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to some of the messaging that we work on. So one of the most important things with a powerful social media campaign is having your message and having that cohesive message that you know will reach your audience. And later I'll get to a little bit to how do you determine and identify that audience. But in Maine, we've seen that local messaging is really powerful and tends to perform better. We know that there are a multitude of global and national benefits to aquaculture. But when you're speaking to Mainers and trying to grow support for the industry in Maine, a lot of it has more to do with the local aspects. How does that relate to me? What can aquaculture do for me? Or how can I be involved? So some of those examples that we've seen through our own message testing have to do with economic growth in Maine, sustainability with Maine's environment, and of course, Maine's working waterfront heritage, how aquaculture fits into that and diversifies that important part of Maine culture. And so one of the first things you have to do is identify your audience. So once you've developed that message, deciding who it is you want to reach. So at the MAA, we have a variety of different audiences. We could be trying to reach fishermen, scientists, seafood consumers, tourists, and all have different interests and different values that speak to them. So identifying those and then deciding who it is you're trying to reach with your campaign or your post is really important. And then with social media, knowing which platforms these demographics are using. So knowing whether Instagram is the best platform or TikTok or LinkedIn is really important to make sure that you have the best impact with the content that you're creating. and also what kind of content do people consume. We've seen that video content tends to do very well in terms of folks' attention spans, and pulling people in a way that is different than traditional written media or physical printed materials. And often that requires getting the data on your users to see what content they prefer, possibly what is the age range of your user base. So our platform has been around, and we've been able to look at the data using the business tools provided to us by Meta to see what is the age range of our follower base. Where are they located? Delivery and timing, are they viewing it on their computer or their phone in the morning or the evening? All these valuable data points that can be used to create a powerful campaign. You can also find, as an individual, a lot of that information online. There's a lot of different polling data. The seafood guide that Kim put together also provides a lot of valuable information that you can take with you to your campaigns as a grower. And we've also done polling, and we have a lot of that information. So use the information that others have put together to help your campaigns. And then content creation. That can often be the most intimidating part of social media. And we at the MAA really work at powerful storytelling. And so some of those key aspects are that emotional connection, like Kim mentioned, the human aspect. Who are the farmers? A lot of the times they're your neighbors, they're in your community, and you can have that personal connection rather than a sort of external connection to aquaculture, or maybe you don't understand what it is, or you have this idea that is less sort of humanized. Transparency is also really important. There's some people who have no idea what aquaculture looks like. And if you are able to use visual content to show them what an oyster farm looks like, show them what net pen salmon farming looks like, it can go a really long way to developing that image in that person's head, and also dispelling some of the misconceptions or myths around the industry that they have. Social media also has a wider reach and accessibility. You can reach a very broad range of ages, regions, interests on social media in a really quick way. And it also the algorithm provides a way to sort of broaden that reach, and also metrics. You can view audience engagement. Posts can be places where people interact and share comments and build that network of, like-minded folks or folks who are arriving at, your posts, and it's their first introduction to aquaculture. Costs can also be really low. I know that it can sometimes seem intimidating to create videos, but most of the content you're seeing on social media is produced on an iPhone, and you can edit a lot of that video content and photo content directly on the platforms that you're using. And, for added things, you can use wireless microphones, which are relatively inexpensive for interview content like we have done in the past. And there's other pretty low cost editing platforms that you can use depending on your needs as a content creator. We've had some recently successful campaigns. We ran a paid ads campaign on social media and Google and YouTube that reached a ton of folks with various messages about aquaculture. We've also done some organic posts on our social media around myth busting in the industry, and also highlighting a recent program that we helped start, the apprenticeship program, which is a career opportunity for young people looking to enter the industry. And we got a ton of traction on that. We had over 30,000 views across 6 videos just on Instagram. And we think that a lot of that had to do with the emotional aspect, hearing directly from people in the industry, seeing what jobs are like in the industry, directly on the farm, folks in their Grendons, getting wet, possibly being cold, developing that valuable transparency that we're seeing as a really important part of any social media campaign that we do. And then we have started sort of an educational series for the myth busting around the industry, just little educational videos that highlight some of the missing pieces that can be easily explained in a visual way or through fun facts. And we're seeing that even just those small snapshots do really well, and people really learn a lot and are really appreciative of the work that we do. And I will just say finally, because we are an industry representative and a trade association, we try to do a lot to sort of bridge that gap for growers who don't necessarily have time to utilize social media. So what we hope to do is lay some of that groundwork, do some of that education that will help their businesses succeed where they might not necessarily have the time or the resources or possibly the digital literacy to do so. So we try to support that with what we do on our platforms and reach that audience that may then be going to them and buying their product with a better developed knowledge about the industry. And one thing that I've kind of learned from my role in the MAA is that I learn from every campaign that I do and it's kind of taking stock of what went well, what didn't went well, and what you can do next time. Social media is constantly evolving, and there's always different ways to maximize your reach and improve your content. And so you will always be learning about how to improve your campaigns and noticing, you know, did you reach the audience that you intended to? How could you do that better next time? It's not like you need to arrive with a, you know, perfect plan that's going to achieve all of your goals. You'll always be learning whenever you're using social media. And that's all that I have. You should definitely check out the Maine Aquaculture Instagram and the Maine Oyster Trail Instagram for some of the content that we'll be rolling out.
Great. Thank you so much, Trixie. That's really helpful context building into Maine. And next, we will be hearing from a couple of farmers. So Alicia is first. I will just add a spotlight for you there. So Alicia is the founder of Naughty Sisters Sea Farm in Yarmouth, Maine. She launched this business in 2020. And despite challenging times during the early pandemic, she has experienced exceptional growth, expanding over 6-fold since the business began. And not only is she an oyster farmer, she's also an active consultant, guiding over 100 LPA and lease applications through Maine's regulatory process. Alicia has a huge amount of experience on the water, but also on social media. And she's going to tell us today about some of her social media campaigns. So take it away, Alicia.
Good time to unmute. Hi, thank you for having me. So it's been kind of an interesting journey with social media for me. And I think that there's a lot that I can share that's different than Kim, Trixie, and Paxton's experiences, because both of them are representing or research kind of from different perspectives. At my brand, a lot of what we're doing is, and it never really started necessarily intentionally, but really what Naughty Sisters has become is truly like storytelling about myself, my experience, and like the trials and tribulations of owning a farm, and then the people who work with us. And through that, I think that the things that have kind of come as a result, as people are, you know, identify with our brand, support the women on the water, you know, this small scale aquaculture, and it leads to a high level of engagement and high level of trust. In my time kind of on social media, I think early on, like before I ever even had an oyster, I had an understanding of kind of early age influencers before it really blew up in the way that it is now. So my first brand partnership was actually while I was in college with Hydro Flask. And one of the, I think, most impactful things that came as a result of this brand partnership was understanding how brands identify social media influencers and what they're looking for. So I was one of 34 people in the United States selected. And one of the things they required was us to go through a slideshow. And it's really interesting because I decided to look this up today. When I was first selected, I was the smallest influencer by over like 8,000 followers. It went from me at 1,500 followers at the time on my personal social media to the next smallest was 10. At the time, If you're under 2,000 followers, you're considered a micro influencer. Today, if you are under, I think, 10,000, you are considered a nano influencer. So I think that just demonstrates, yeah, under 10,000 followers is now considered nano. Above 10,000 to 100,000 is considered a micro influencer. So one of the things that I've come to learn about beyond storytelling and authentic marketing, which is really what I lend myself to doing, it's usually off the cuff, pretty funny, very transparent. So the joke has been for a while that I eat sandwiches and I cry on the internet. But what that really means is I really humanize my brand. So when I only have a second and I'm covered in mud and I realize, oh crap, I haven't posted on Instagram today and I want to post something. Well, here I am, dirty with all of my gear around me. But people identify with that. And that's some of my highest engaged content. And then in terms of posts, I've been really transparent when I'm having a really rough time, when financials are tight, or I don't know what I'm doing, or the boat isn't running, or we hit bottom literally. And that lends people again to identify with you, because often, and particularly the last few years, social media has really peaked in perfection. And I've kind of been like, I don't have time for perfection. This is all you're getting. But as a result, I have an extremely high engagement. I primarily use Instagram. I do use Facebook. I continue to use my personal Facebook much more than I think I would if I didn't have a business, to continue engagement with the community I built as a younger person. But where I'm going with all of this is there are different types of influencers and there's different types of social media goals. So our brand is actually more of like an influencer than selling our product. My goal is not really to sell oysters on my Instagram or my social media. My goal is to create brand recognition and partnerships to grow visibility. And so how do we do that? When we go to restaurants and we do different events, we're always trying to tag any collaborators with us so that they might share our content, that they might share us on their story, they share us on their page. When I'm just out on the farm, like wearing sunglasses, I started tagging Ray-Ban, I started tagging Spy Optics. And as a result, Spy Optics reached out and started working with us. Through tagging Extra Tough, we actually became very close to having a boot brand deal, which unfortunately was squashed by a change in all of their management. 40 people were let go a week after our meeting. But really big things came from just tagging people on social media. We're constantly reshared by Carolina Skiff or Grundens, and those kinds of things are what increase your visibility. But the content that you put out and the intentions that you might have with it increase your engagement. Now, I never thought that eating a sandwich online might be my highest interacted content. And I can tell you that my mom is repulsed by it. And the funniest thing is I posted a recent video of me eating a wonton like an animal, and she was very upset about it. So I posted that online, and it's my highest engaged content of sharing that my mom was upset about me eating sandwiches on both my personal and business social media. I find that using polls and things that people can respond to, that is what the algorithm is looking for to support. And finally, and I assume majority of us all attendees and speakers are in this nano influencer space, even as a business or an organization. The thing that we do get is on average, the highest level of engagement. So on average, I think I read online, it's around 4% right now. And in the last 90 days, mine was at like 22% engagement. And the interesting thing with that is I actually just took the last month off of posting on my business Instagram because I was using it too much, I felt like. And I decided to give myself a breather. But in the last 90 days, we're still at that place. And in the last 30 days, we've still engaged more than 8,000 accounts. And that's because the content that you have, you can reutilize it. I share stuff on my stories, even though I wasn't creating new content. So where I'm really going with this is no matter what end of the spectrum you are on or the quality of content you produce, it's who you get to use it and get to share it. I see incredible social media accounts that have very, very low engagement because there's nothing putting them in front of people other than that single time that it's posted. And so for me, I find that include tagging every person that might be in that video or tagging every brand that might be included. I actually have started using hashtags, which I always thought were stupid. And, you know, I think there's some silly thing about it, but we are being found from hashtags. There's hashtag generators. There's ChatGPT that can give you suggestions. That's actually really impressive. So I guess I wanted to lean into, there is a space to be a small level business or have a small following where you can have really high levels of engagement and brand recognition that will lead you to having higher levels of like interaction with your website, merchandise sales, farm tours, and brand partnerships. And I'm honestly, I was just told by someone who works at a very large business that they're leaning into the micro influencer space again and that nano influencer space because the larger the following, the more people want to be paid or get in return, and they actually are seeing better outcomes in the smaller space. So like the 5 to 10,000 follower area is like you're right in the pocket to kind of get a lot out of your business and your brand. And even if you're not seeking brand partnerships, it means that you're in the space where you have the highest level of trust, the most authenticity.
Great. Thank you so much for that insight, Alicia. Really fascinating, honestly.
I would just share too. I always joke that like, to be honest now, the more I know, I'm like, it's the things that I post are very authentic, but they're also very intentional. I remember one final like thing that's so silly that got an insane level of engagement is like whenever I'm like, oh, it's low, I post a dumb question that people resonates with people. And this was on my personal. And I was just like, I will die on the hill of I hate overhead light. And then it was like, do you like overhead light? Yes, no, like, you know, whatever. And the number of people who wrote me DMs, it was like 60 DMs of people who had an opinion. And sometimes it just takes something as silly as that to up your engagement so that when you post the content you really want to share, it's in front of them.
Very strategic. I like it.
Now everybody's going to think I'm fake on me.
I don't think anyone's going to think you're fake anywhere ever, Alicia. You're pretty authentic. I'd say that's your brand. So thank you so much for sharing. And reminder, anybody who has questions, put them in the chat. We'll get to them in a couple minutes. But for our last presenter today, I'd like to introduce Paxton. So Paxton is a oyster hatchery technician at MAIC Sea Farm in Walpole, Maine. And she also is a part of the new social media team at MAIC, where she is actively looking to engage with consumers and continue building relationships in the shellfish community. So welcome, Paxton, and all you. Yep, your slides are up, so. Perfect.
Hello, everyone. So I know it's hard to come back from what Alicia said, but we're a little different. So at MAIC Sea Farm, I've kind of fell into the social media side of it because I noticed we are kind of like a legacy company. We've been around since '85. So I'm trying to come back in a way that showcases, okay, we've been here for a while, but what are we doing? So we're just a little different on what we can and cannot post, to say the least. But I'd like to start out with, yes, people do like to see people. People like to see smiling faces. People like to see the authentic content that, because they can relate with that. So at MAIC Sea Farm, we are both a farm and then a hatchery. So we got the science side of it, that community that I'm trying to reach because we do collaborations that way, as well as our consumers who we are trying to reach to know about our product. And that's kind of what I will state on is that surprisingly, when I came into the business, my neighbors in Booth Bay Harbor did not even know about MAIC Sea Farm, and that was at this lovely Pemmican Oyster Festival, which was held in town. People did not know about us, and we are literally right next door, to say the least. So that blew my mind. And that idea was that I want to start connecting with the community because we've been around for a long time, but nobody knows about us, as crazy as that is. So what I have on the screen here is examples to what everybody had said. So yes, videos do well on Instagram. As you can see, our Facebook, nobody really wanted to look at our videos unless they were science-based. So I noticed that they didn't really care too much for our like dominant dirty photos. They cared more for our science-based, what our hatchery was doing and how our oysters were doing on that side compared to our Instagram. So then the other one on the other side is a photo from our Instagram. We had more reach on our just regular tagging people to come down to the Pemmican Oyster Festival. We had way more people on Facebook that was very excited about it. I had people actually come up and they were like, oh, we saw that, but they had no idea about us beforehand. And the idea is, yes, tag everyone that is applicable. That is how we got more reach. We had the town that reposted everything. We had other people around that were our friends. They were just tagging and they were like, oh, yes, come. Compared to Instagram, where it's a little different. So each platform is different in how the reach goes, how the share goes. We didn't see very many people interacting because it was just a photo. So we got more on a video end of it. People were like, oh, exciting, compared to a photo. So I'm definitely learning, as many of you would be learning from each post, each campaign that you would be doing, that certain things work better on certain platforms. Definitely the videos for us were way better. We had over 5,000 plus people interact with our giveaway. That went nicely for our first one. And then compared to if we posted something about science, people are like, that's science, because it's not giving a life like a human face to it. It's just science. Instagram likes to see faces, as we noticed. We had literally the next day a photo of our smiling assistants that were out on the water, cold as heck, and that one got a lot of reach. And that was lovely because everybody's like, oh, we've been there. It's cold right now. That's how we feel. But in all of that, because everybody covered such a lovely everything, it is such an evolving door. Like, you do not know. You can spend hours on content and expect it to be wonderful, but it may not. It may fall flat. Don't get discouraged if your first post is like, that's not great. Like, nobody really interacted. It is literally building and continuing and not giving up. I work 99% of my time in the hatchery. We have 12-hour days. We are just going. And where do I fit in social media? That is always the question. And that is always changing because we don't know when we can post, when we will, because as our company, it's special. So you got to be careful of what you do post, because you don't want to make people angry, or you don't want to make your coworkers angry that you posted them and they're like, oh, no. So always get like a permission in that sense. If you work at like a larger company that has multiple areas, you want to make sure people are okay with what goes online, because people will see it and they will email your director and be like, what are you doing? Type thing. But in all, people do like the authentic, I can't even say that word. The authentic content that people put, and that's the faces. They like to see the down and dirty on some platforms, apparently, as I'm learning. And some people that we've seen, like the community aspect and getting involved in the community. I did this large post that was tagging everybody in our community that sold our oysters. And now we are slowly getting people finding us because of that, because they're like, oh, you are local and we know where you are, we know your face, and moving forward that way. So I am learning, as many of you are, and don't give up. Even when you're tired or if you're taking a break, don't give up. You know, just take it easy and you will find the content and the people will find you, because the idea is if you influence one person, that person could then evolve into more. So that's how I like it. If I influence one person that saw our oysters, and then that's the goal. But otherwise, that is the idea, because I know questions are coming up. But yeah, just take it easy and have fun with it, and just be you, I got to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paxton. I love hearing the perspective of both companies next to each other. I think that's really cool. So I'm just gonna remove all of the spotlights here. And we'll have some questions. So I think Sydney and Emily are gonna take some questions and share them with the group.
Thanks so much, everybody. That was really super interesting and I think really helpful. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and feel free to add more questions to those of you who are watching. We have two kind of related questions about scheduling posts or post frequency. So the first one is, how do you handle scheduling posts across platforms? There are different kinds of software that are out there, like Hootsuite is this example. Using those, and then posting frequency. Is there like an optimal frequency on social media that balances time to produce content versus the impact? Who wants to take that? I don't know. Trixie, yeah?
Yeah, I can answer maybe the first part about posting across platforms. I just started using a platform called Buffer, which lets me queue up posts, schedule them. And that was also kind of born out of not wanting to be on my phone all the time at work, like working as, you know, having my job be on social media and working on a computer. It's easy to get sidetracked on my phone. And then I'm like, oh, I could share this, you know, what is this person up to? And then before we know it, I'm on the explore page. So, you know, having that feel a little bit more like sending emails, I think kind of helps separate the, like, this is a social platform, which I also personally use, from, you know, these are campaigns that I'm trying to launch as part of my job. And then also, as someone who doesn't like to waste a ton of time on social media, having me be accountable of that time and just not just end up kind of on the app. I recommend Buffer a lot. It's a great platform.
Yeah, go ahead, Alicia. Thanks, Trixie.
I thought I would share. I have used Buffer, not as much for my business, but for other businesses that I've worked with. And I do like it. It allows you, I think the unpaid version, you can have it like text you the stuff at the time you want to post. If you pay for it, it'll automatically post to each social media account. So we could vary a post a little bit between like a Facebook and an Instagram, with the same imagery or slightly different, however we might want. We could also adjust posting times. I think historically when you post, there used to be like more of a timing piece because it was in in order of timing. Now it's like algorithm based. So it's a little bit harder to gauge, and that's something I just seem to ignore most of the time. I do find that in the evening or first thing in the morning, like 6:45, either time of AM or PM, like seem to be better. You can like Google when the most people are active on social media too. But Buffer is a good tool. I think it's better for curated content, but also that's something I've been investigating myself, because, you know, sometimes we make a bunch of content in one day and then have to remember to post over a number of days. And then I think I'm reading this question. Is there an optimal frequency? I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. You know, one of the things I find is like recently we've had really high engagement on like Meet the Team posts, but we have tons of posts. So there's a balance between the number of posts that you have and how easy it is for someone to like identify information on your page. I find larger influencers who post all the time do a lot of reintroductions of themselves in their story. So content gets repetitive, but when you have low levels of engagement, that's okay. Realistically, people who work to grow their following encourage you to post every day. But it depends on what is your goal and what is your outcome. Are you trying to sell oysters? Are you trying to grow your brand? Are you trying to sell merchandise? Are you trying to gain social license? Maybe you're trying to hide some of the things that you do so you can maintain your social license. Like it's want to not hide, but reduce the visibility of certain things.
Thanks, Alicia. Any other comments on those questions? I feel like all right, Sydney has a question next.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Great presentations. So one question we have in the chat right now is, what's the most effective metric to use to measure efficacy of your social media? Throw that out to the group.
I think sometimes there's a lot of numbers that you can get out of social media, whether it's interaction rate, engagement rate, new followers in the past 30 days versus the past 90 days. But I think a lot of the time it's the really concrete and almost qualitative interactions you get, like the comments. When, you know, a post can get a ton of likes and then no comments, but when someone really takes initiative to interact with your post and show openly that they've interacted with your post and not just become a list of likes, I think that can be really powerful. And also because comment spaces are where people can interact with each other and kind of builds that network. I think that's a really powerful one. But I think kind of like Alicia was saying, interaction rate, engagement rate, you can have a ton of followers and have nobody interacting with your posts, but the rate, you know, you don't have to have a ton of, you could either have a ton of followers or not have that many followers, but the rate of, you know, who's following you and who is staying engaged with your content rather than just, you know, passively viewing it is really valuable, I think, to, you know, demonstrating the success of your platform.
Also, it might just be helpful to, like, your engagement rate is your likes and comments divided by your total number of followers. So like, I do believe like one person can kind of hit 2 points if they like and comment on your post. That's like and comment divided by or the number of people that follow you. Just so people have an understanding, what does it mean to have, like, how do they calculate an engagement rate? You'll see some people, like particularly bigger influencers, respond back to every single comment, or they'll say, comment here and I'll follow up. And like, that's how people grow bigger levels of engagement. I think efficacy comes from like it's also about your goal and your outcome. So recently we had a video go like semi-viral. It definitely got like the most views of anything I've ever put out, which was over 300,000. And as a result, we actually gained over 2,000 followers in 5 to 7 days. We had the lowest number of website clicks ever. And since I've taken a month off of social media, we've had the most orders come in a while. I think social media is a bit of a confusing animal and on that front.
Yeah, thanks for that, guys.
You want to ask the last one in the chat here, Sydney?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so our last question we have in the chat, and we have time for a couple more if more people have questions. Any tips for working with a social media team, like a full-time person plus an intern or a volunteer or something like that, as opposed to singular communicators or dedicated departments? And so I think we have a kind of a variety of different folks here who are kind of doing it singly or in groups. So let you guys answer that one.
I mean, I can just jump. So I want to be very clear. I am not a social media expert. At the aquarium, we had our social media team. I'm the messaging person. But the way, I mean, structure is really important, and having that strategic plan for social media is going to be super important. The larger your team is, the more important that company-wide strategy is going to be. Yeah, I would say for those larger teams, you definitely want to have a clear strategy in place that all employees are aware of and can follow.
I would like to add to as well, Communication, I mean, with the team that I work with, we are not in the same building. We may not even see each other for months, but the communication and knowing what they're doing, what content they are helping create, and just being actively engaging, even if you're not, obviously our farm, it's a lot smaller than larger companies, but is the communication we text each other all the time. We will also make sure that we're going through the correct avenues. But I think, yeah, communication and making sure that nobody feels left out. And we have meetings as well to just make sure that we have the same idea, the same foundation, and what we want the end goal to be. So just making sure everybody's on the same page is
Yeah, I think also, at least for the MAA's goals, our social media and social license and communications goals are shared between a lot of different Maine organizations. So like MAIC, ARI, we're all working to educate people about aquaculture. So whereas I'm only one person on, the communications team, we're a very small team at the MAA. I work all the time sort of cross-posting, looking to amplify the reach, sending things to Maya and Sydney and people at other organizations saying, hey, could you share this? Or do you know anyone that would be interested in this? So, at the MA, we only have me right now, but I feel very much connected to the other organizations in accomplishing these same goals. We may have different social media platforms, but we're always sharing each other's posts and working really collaboratively to kind of achieve these same goals. So that's a benefit too, of just being in Maine, and I'm sure that's the case in other places, but specifically in Maine, we're really good collaborators.
Yeah, definitely.
We have one more, Paxton, I'm loving the cat tail appearing randomly on your screen. It's like the Cheshire cat, but with the tail. I thought we'd wrap up. This has been so great. Do you think each of you could share kind of one takeaway, what you think is most important, very short sentence before we wrap today on number one tip for social media?
Sure, I'll go first. Just really quickly, have fun with it. And again, your voice matters. It's really important. Don't get too bogged down by the details. Have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that just keeping in mind that you have a great story to tell, I think, and Kim kind of talked about engaging with the negative comments, whether or not to do that, how to do that. We're working all the time to do really proactive messaging because Maine Aquaculture has a great story to tell. And so, yeah, not getting bogged down when there are, trolls or haters on your pages, because and kind of reminding yourself, yes, have fun, and also you're doing work that you should be proud of, whether it's telling your business farmer story or talking about the industry at large. It can sometimes be hard. Social media can be a tricky place, but keeping that in mind will kind of help you have success down the line.
show your community and just be out there, be visible, just show your face and show that community that you're there, and it just kind of, you'll attract the tribe that you want to. So just show off.
Yeah, I guess my final notes is lean into what works well for you. What are your strengths? Are you good at photography? Are you good at videos? I used to not think anything of reels, and then found that I actually enjoyed making them. So lean into what best fits you, because that's what will be the easiest. And also remember that social media doesn't dictate the success of your business. If I learned anything from other jobs and working with other businesses, it was incredible. I was working with seafood distributors and producers that don't exist on the internet. And the production that they have and the facilities and the quality of their product was exceptional, and they didn't need social media to dictate the success of their business. But it's a tool in my toolbox. And I joke all the time when I talk to men who get not just men, but occasionally I've had interactions where people are annoyed about the publicity or things that our business has received. And it's Fortunately for us, storytelling is my strength. Fortunately for you, you're really good at farming. So don't feel that you're behind if you aren't utilizing social media. You know, I'm trying to lean into TikTok in like different things and realizing that even at 25, I'm now feeling a little bit old and removed from TikTok or like whatever it might be. So just don't feel behind. It's an incredible tool. But if it's not yielding results that impact your quality of life, your happiness, or your business, or your brand recognition that you want, then don't feel pressured to always do it. I really believe in that.
Great. Thank you so much for your tips and also for all of your expertise. It's been such an informative webinar. This is a recorded webinar, so it will be available sometime in the next couple weeks online. And remember, May 17th for the next MAIC webinar. So until then, thank you for coming and we'll see you soon.